Here's what just 10 to 20% extra effort can do to your physique. This is how I look when I'm coasting, when I put in 70 to 80% effort into my training and nutrition. And this is how I look when I push just 10 to 20% harder, especially on the nutrition side. The difference is night and day. In this video, I'll show you exactly what to do to break past the intermediate plateau and go from looking like an average gym goer to someone who truly stands out. But first, let's define the intermediate level. Most lifters think of intermediate as the middle range on an objective scale of muscle development, as if all guys should look similar at that stage. This is wrong. In reality, people have different starting points and ceilings of muscle development set by their genetics. So intermediate can look quite different from person to person. The way I see it, there are three main components of good muscle building genetics. Number one, baseline muscle mass and strength. This is the amount of muscle and strength a person starts out with and returns to if they stop training. Number two, rate of progress. That is, how quickly someone builds muscle in response to lifting weights. And number three, development ceiling. How much muscle you can ultimately build naturally.
I was born with the genetics, which is something that's genetics is God-given talent.
The very best lifters, those with unbelievable physiques, excel in all three. They were unusually muscular even as kids, they grew rapidly once they started lifting, and their development ceiling is so high that people regularly accuse them of using steroids. On the flip side, you have lifters that are deficient in all three. They start out skin and bones, barely respond to training, and appear to need specialization programs even to reach 2 plates on the bench press. Obviously, intermediate is not the same for two such individuals. In fact, the baseline of a highly gifted lifter might be in the intermediate range for someone else, and the ceiling of a mediocre lifter might be in the intermediate range of a world champion. And there's another aspect as well, the rate of progress in response to training. It's common to see fitness influencers show their transformations from scrawny to jacked and say, if someone as skinny as me could do it, anyone can. Sounds inspiring, but it's unfortunately bullshit. Because while someone's baseline can be very low, skin and bones, their rate of progress and development ceiling may be elite. And in my opinion, that's a way better genetic hand than starting out averagely muscled but barely responding to training, or plateauing before you can even fill out a medium t-shirt. I won't get into the details here, but the four main factors that explain good genetics are the number of nuclei and satellite cells per muscle fiber, the degree of ribosome biogenesis following training, androgen receptor density, and the degree of upregulation of microRNAs that promote protein synthesis. Basically, people who grow better can transmit the tension signal from lifting weights to the cell nucleus more effectively, and they've got more of the molecular machinery that turns amino acids into new muscle tissue. Eventually, I'll make a full video about what it actually means to have good genetics, and I'll explain the biology and the molecular interactions that we understand so far. It's fascinating stuff. But why am I telling you all of this here? Because it means that the amount of effort you need to progress beyond what's culturally considered intermediate depends on how gifted you are. Some unlucky lifters will need to pour as much focus and discipline into their training and nutrition as professional bodybuilders do. I know, it's not fair, but luckily I think this won't be your experience. You probably simply lack one or two of the fundamentals, and fixing those will unlock your progress. An analogy for this is the combination lock. You might already have 5 or 6 numbers correctly dialed in, but the lock still won't come open because 1 or 2 are wrong. Maybe you train hard, maybe you follow a solid split, maybe you hit your protein and do many other things correctly, but maybe you don't track your calories, or maybe you're not using a good progression model. Fixing that one thing might be all it takes to get the lock to open and for your progress to take off. This video will help you identify what that may be. Let's get started. In my view, there are 5 common training mistakes that keep people stuck at the intermediate level. Missing workouts, lack of effort, not tracking workouts, choosing high-risk exercises and rep ranges, and using poorly designed programs. I'll address these one by one. Consistently doing all your scheduled workouts improves your physique more than anything else. Be honest, how many workouts did you miss in the last 6 months? 1 a week on average? If so, think about how costly that is. In trained lifters, the anabolic signal is brief. Protein synthesis stays elevated for only about 2 days post-workout. If you miss one weekly session, some of your muscle groups go unstimulated for 7 to 14 days, so you can't stack adaptations and grow. Moreover, skipping one session eliminates between 20 and 35% of your weekly volume, depending on the split you use. That's enough to stall an intermediate. I can tell you that every jacked natural I know is really consistent with their training. They usually go months without missing a single workout. You'll need to do the same. But how? There are two parts to consistency: motivation and good systems. The most insidious reason we fail is that we forget what we want. No, seriously. From the moment we wake up, our attention gets captured by mindless scrolling, daily problems and chores, and our priorities tend to fade from our minds as the days pass. You probably have a fitness goal that you set a few weeks or months ago, and if you stop and think about it now, you remember it. But in daily life, on a moment-to-moment basis, you forget it. You're not connected to it, and this makes you vulnerable to distractions, to laziness, and to poor choices. Because blurry goals have little pull power. So the first step to consistency is to reconnect with your goal and then keep it top of mind. Here's what you need to do. Take a few minutes today and write a short description of your fitness goal. Why getting jacked matters to you, why it's a priority, and what you'll sacrifice. It could look something like this. I'm building a top physique to be visibly attractive and command respect. It's a top priority because that feeling is better than the taste of food or the comfort of the couch. I'll trade snacks, late nights, and flaky plans for training on schedule and hitting my macros. But a shot of motivation is not enough. Motivation is what gets you started, but good systems are what keep you going. The key is to make your training enjoyable and non-negotiable. Here's how you do that. First, settle on a training split that you can sustain through your busiest, most chaotic periods and not just when conditions are ideal. A 3-day split executed perfectly will bring you better results than a 5-day split in which you often miss 2 of those workouts. Second, make sure that you enjoy your training, because how you feel during workouts predicts future adherence. Pick the split, the exercises, and the rep ranges you genuinely enjoy, regardless of what others say is optimal. If you hate doing it, drop it and replace it with something else. Finally, and most importantly, make working out a time and place decision, not a daily debate. In other words, decide on a time to hit the gym every day and make it non-negotiable in your mind. For example, I currently work out at 12. At noon. When it's around 11:40, I stop whatever I'm doing, pack my bag and leave for the gym. There's no debate going on in my head. There's no, I still have much work to do, I'm feeling kind of tired today, it's raining. None of that. It's non-negotiable. If it's 12 on Monday to Friday, then I'm going to the gym. Everything else needs to adjust around that. This is the sort of attitude you need to develop, because when you repeat the same action in the same context, disciplines stop being willpower battles and become automatic. And you won't be missing workouts anymore. Yes? No, I was gonna ask how many sets you still have left, but I see you're just warming up. No, that was my last set. That was your last set? Let's see some effort next time. The best available evidence suggests that the closer you take a set to failure, the more muscle growth it stimulates. There is a somewhat linear relationship between effort and growth. Now, the effect is small. Sets taken 1 to 3 reps shy of failure build about as much muscle as those that leave 0 reps in reserve. So you don't actually need to train to failure all the time in order to grow. But the problem is, many lifters overestimate their effort. Even on the bench press, which is supposed to be the man's ego lift. In this study, researchers asked regular gym goers to load the bench press with the weight they normally use for 10 reps and then perform as many reps as possible with that weight. Guess what happened? They completed an average of 16 reps. More than a quarter reached 19 reps. Only a few got it right and chose a true 10-rep weight. A later meta-analysis confirmed these findings. Regular gym goers tend to gravitate towards sets of 10 reps with about 55% of their 1-rep max and leave about 6 to 7 reps in reserve. This is half-assed effort at best, and it largely explains why many intermediate lifters fail to build muscle over time. What I find fascinating is that effort is often the only variable that needs to change for an experienced lifter to start making progress again. We see this clearly in training studies. Intermediate and even advanced lifters who've been training for many years often increase their muscle size by 5% in just 8 to 12 weeks. This level of growth is far beyond what most people typically observe when training on their own. Why is that? They're doing the same exercises, similar volume, similar splits. The answer is that participants in training studies pour far more effort into their workouts than they usually do. Researchers make sure their lifters don't skip sessions. They watch every rep and shout, "One more!" towards the end of the set for maximum effort. And they force their lifters to adhere strictly to the program without deviating based on whims.
And I think that's a huge thing that people don't realize is you've got a room full of graduate students who are maybe even needing you to do this for them to get their master's or their PhD, right? So they're going to damn well be sure that you are finishing at the target RIR, that you are, they have a stopwatch, they have a list of exercises, and they have a target RIR, or you're going to failure. After 12 weeks and in the exit interviews, and this has been done, so that's the hardest I've ever trained in my life, and certainly better than it would be in the real world, even if there is some drop off.
I saw the same effect with my friend Radu. He's been training for over 10 years, but lately he'd been going to the gym with little drive. When we started training together again last year, I brought back a high standard of effort and suddenly he was making gains like a beginner.
To be honest, I wasn't really feeling going to the gym, and maybe that's why I wasn't putting enough effort in to see the gains that I was hoping for. And only after I've restarted training with Radu after 10 plus years, have I realized how half-heartedly I was really training and what's the amount of effort that I need to put in order to make gains again.
There's a valuable lesson here. Effort alone can restart progress. The primary driver of muscle growth is progressive tension overload. That is, adding weight, reps or sets over time. If an intermediate lifter is able to lift heavier weights next year compared to now, he will be bigger. But if he lifts the same weight for the same number of reps, he won't be, even if he's training consistently, getting pumps and experiencing soreness. To understand why that is, you need to look at how muscle grows. When muscle contracts strongly against resistance, muscle fibers experience a type of force that tries to stretch them. This is what we mean by mechanical tension. Within muscle fibers, there are some proteins that are sensitive to tension and get deformed by it. Researchers call them mechanosensors. When these mechanosensors deform, their new shape reacts with other molecules inside the muscle cell, triggering a complex molecular signaling cascade that ends with the construction of new muscle tissue from amino acids taken from food. So muscle growth is initiated by tension and is enabled by nutrition. Now, what's interesting is that progressive tension overload can be viewed as both the cause and the effect of muscle growth. Let's say that you lift 80 kilograms for 3 sets of 8 on the bench press. This load and rep range provides sufficient tension to initiate muscle growth. Bigger muscles lead to increased strength, which allows you to add more weight to the bar or more reps over time, which maintains the tension sufficiently high to support even more growth, and so on. When you look at it this way, progressive overload appears to be an inevitable consequence of training. You lift weights, muscle grows over time, your strength goes up and makes those weights feel lighter. And when they become too light to provide sufficient tension, you know it's time to add weight or reps. However, this is not how things unfold in reality. For intermediate lifters, a challenging weight doesn't become light over time if you lift it for the same number of sets and reps. It continues to feel heavy indefinitely. So if you wait for progression to happen by itself, it usually never does. You can lift the same 3 sets of 8 with 80 kilograms for a whole year, and it will never feel like the time to increase the weight because it feels too easy. In reality, the only way to achieve progressive overload is to make a conscious effort to add reps or weight, even when the set already feels hard as hell. It's only by pushing your performance upwards 1 rep at a time or 1 small plate at a time that you can make a previously challenging set eventually feel light. When viewed from this perspective, strength progression can be seen as the cause of muscle growth rather than the result. It isn't. Muscle is what leads to strength, among other things. But in practice, it's helpful to view it incorrectly and think that strength gains drive muscle growth. Instead of thinking, I can do this extra rep because my muscles have grown, you have to think, if I do this extra rep, my muscles will grow. You have to fight for every single extra rep and every single extra small plate that you add to the bar or to the machine. It's the only way to move forward. And this is where tracking workouts becomes essential. The way you record your training is up to you. You can use a workout app, the notes app on your phone, a spreadsheet, or an old school notebook. What matters is that each time you train, you should know exactly what you lifted last time. The exercises, the weight, the sets, and the reps. And your goal should be to beat the training log in some way. The weight you use and the number of reps you attempt should almost always be decided by the training log. I personally use the workout app called Bootcamp. I'm affiliated with them, and actually, you can get my current training program for free inside the app by going to the link raduantoniu.com/5day. This is the program that has built my current physique. And here's how I use the app. Before I begin each set, I check my previous performance and set a clear goal: do at least one more rep than last time. Then I put the phone down and go into the set with the intent to hit that rep target. After the set, I pick the phone back up and record my actual result. If I hit the goal, great. I know I'm progressing and building muscle. If I failed, that's fine too. The point is that tracking gives every set a purpose. You're not going in blindly. You always have a target, and that mindset ensures high effort and steadily forces the progressive overload that drives muscle growth. And like I said, the direction of causality goes from muscle growth to strength. The more contractile tissue you have in parallel, basically the thicker the muscle, the more force you can produce and the more weight you can lift. Of course, strength depends on many other factors, you can see them all in this graphic. But since most of these stay fixed over time, muscle size ends up being the main variable that drives strength. That's why muscle size and strength are so closely linked. So you can actually use strength standards as a way to estimate your level of muscle development. To move beyond the intermediate stage, you'll need to exceed these standards. In other words, you can chase strength to reach a desired level of muscularity. And when you exceed these numbers, I can virtually guarantee you'll be above intermediate. In my conversations with audience members and gym goers over the years, I found that one of the primary reasons intermediate lifters stay stuck is because of frequent setbacks, such as injuries and joint pain. And I'm talking about dedicated lifters here, guys who don't miss workouts, who train with high effort, who pay close attention to their nutrition, and yet they fail to progress because of frequent setbacks. Maybe you're one of these lifters yourself. I know I was for a long time. You have a stretch of several months where you train really hard, you follow the program, you track your lifts, you don't miss workouts, you eat well, sleep well, everything is going great, and you make impressive gains in muscle and strength. You even become advanced in some lifts and muscle groups. But then, you experience a setback that erases pretty much all the progress you've made. Maybe you get shoulder pain, or knee pain, or a lower back injury, or you get sick. Something just happens, right when you're in peak condition. This setback prevents you from training or eating properly for a while, and that's enough to erase the progress you've made over a period of several months, because muscle loss happens much faster than growth. The result is that even if you're a smart and dedicated lifter, you just go up and down through the intermediate stage, never quite being able to maintain advanced muscle development for more than a few weeks or months. So, what's the solution? There isn't a single answer because injuries and joint pain are caused by a wide variety of factors. However, a common approach to reduce or avoid them is to include more machine exercises and to use higher rep ranges in your workouts. This systematic review compared injury rates across different weightlifting sports and found that bodybuilding has up to 4 times fewer injuries than powerlifting per 1,000 hours in the gym. And when athletes were asked what they believed caused their injuries, the most common answers were fatigue, lifting overly heavy loads, and improper warm-up. This suggests that machine exercises are likely protective because they reduce the risk of technique breakdown under these conditions. Moreover, training with higher rep ranges and lighter loads lowers shear and compressive forces on the joints, which should further decrease injury risk. For me, incorporating more machine exercises and higher rep ranges has been a complete game changer. I actually designed my current program with safety as the highest priority. I started off with the question, how can I place high tension on my muscles and train to failure while simultaneously placing little stress on my joints so that I can progressively overload for at least a year without getting injured, all while training in a relatively poorly equipped gym so that I can be relatable to most of my audience. This is not a simple puzzle to solve. It's why my routine includes what can only be described as strange exercise selections and rep ranges. I'm doing this weird Smith machine overhead press for shoulders, Smith machine incline bench press, paused front squats for sets of 10, weighted Spanish squats, this weird version of RDLs, and high rep sets of 15 to 20 on hip thrust and leg press, which by the way are brutal. Every one of these choices was made to break this annoying cycle of progress followed by injury setbacks. And it worked. I've now been able to train for an entire year without dealing with micro injuries or nagging pains in my shoulders, knees, or lower back. So if any of this sounds like you, if you found yourself in the same cycle of frustration, then consider making safety your first priority too. Choose exercises that feel safe and stable even when you take them to failure, and train them in the 8 to 20 rep range. It might just be the missing piece that finally unlocks consistent progress. Oh, and if you don't know how to do this by yourself, consider booking a consultation with me. I can help you choose your exercises, set up a custom split, or anything else you might need. The link is in the description. Contrary to what most lifters believe, bad program design is rarely the reason you fail to progress. Seriously, even with a flawed program, you can still push beyond intermediate just by not missing workouts, eating enough, tracking your lifts, and always trying to beat your last session. Those fundamentals are so powerful they almost erase the flaws of a weak program. But the reverse isn't true. A perfectly designed program cannot compensate for poor discipline or low effort. That said, a good program does help. If you're dedicated enough to make gains on a weak plan, you'll make even better gains on a strong one. And sometimes that extra edge is exactly what you need to make progress again. This table shows what I consider the ideal ranges for the variables that make a program effective for intermediates. If your routine falls inside these ranges, the program is probably good, and it isn't the reason you're stuck. If it falls outside them, adjusting those variables will help. Here are 3 examples of programs that I designed based on those variables, setting them up how I prefer. These are programs that I believe will get you to progress beyond intermediate if you don't miss workouts, track every set, and pour high effort to beat your previous performance. But the problem with generic programs is exactly that, they're generic. So if you want something tailored specifically for you, I partnered with Bootcamp to create a Radu AI app that creates personalized workout programs similar to how I do. My philosophy is that effort is somewhat interchangeable with volume. If you push close, I gave this AI my entire training philosophy and programming principles, 40 pages, I gave that to the AI, and now it can create programs that feel like I wrote them myself. You answer a few key questions: your goal, priorities, experience level, available equipment, training days, preferred volume, and any injuries, and it generates a personalized plan. And the coolest part is that you can ask Radu AI to make any changes for you. You can ask for specific splits, different volumes, specific exercises, anything you want, and it will make those changes. Moreover, after you finish each workout, Radu AI reviews what you did and gives you feedback like a coach would. It congratulates you when you made progress and tells you where you deviated from the rep range or need to adjust weight or reps next time. When it comes to nutrition, lifters who get stuck at the intermediate stage tend to fall into 2 broad categories: overeaters and undereaters. Overeaters are people who, left to their own devices, tend to slowly gain weight over time. They consume enough calories and protein to support muscle growth. In fact, they usually need to restrain themselves from eating too much. And so, nutrition is rarely the reason they're stuck. Instead, these lifters don't make progress because they miss workouts, train with low effort, fail to track progression, are set back by frequent injuries, or follow poorly designed programs. For this category, fixing training is enough to solve the plateau, since nutrition already provides the resources required to adapt to it. On the other hand, undereaters may be limited by both poor training habits and insufficient nutrition. Even when they train well, these lifters may still fail to progress because they just don't eat enough. Low appetite, skipped meals, and day-to-day fluctuations in calorie intake undermine recovery and growth. Moreover, fear of fat gain keeps them hovering around maintenance, so body weight is never truly allowed to rise, despite claiming to be bulking. If you fall into the second category, the solution is twofold. First, you have to get lean to set up a long bulk. And second, you have to track calories during that bulk. It may seem counterintuitive to suggest losing body weight when your primary goal is to build muscle and size. However, this advice is not based on any physiological necessity, but rather on psychological permission. Many undereaters are driven by fear of fat gain. They simply do not allow themselves to gain weight at higher body fat levels because they know they'll get fat. That fear leads to subconscious underfeeding. They resist the scale going up. They constantly pull back after a few higher calorie days and sabotage their own surplus, which leads to stalled progress. Cutting to a leaner starting point works because it creates psychological permission to bulk. When a lifter who fears fat gain begins a bulk at what he considers relatively high body fat, he often tolerates only a few kilograms of weight gain before pulling back. But if that same lifter were to start the bulk while carrying less body fat, they would likely be psychologically comfortable gaining several more kilograms, which is what allows the bulk to actually work. This is also why a tracked lean bulk works far better than an unstructured bulk. Tracking macros stabilizes daily energy intake, guarantees adequate protein, and aligns nutrition with training demand. It also allows weight gain to be slow and controlled, which reduces fat gain and prolongs the duration of the bulk. Now look, I know that tracking is annoying. I used to say, there's no way I'll ever track calories during a bulk. Are you kidding me? Weighing and logging food for months on end? It's just not worth it. It's equally effective to weigh myself every day, eat intuitively, and aim to gain between 0.5 and 1 kilogram per month. However, in 2025, I finally tried it. I logged my calorie intake every single day using MacroFactor with an average accuracy of 97%. Really, I only missed a few days that year, and even those I estimated and tracked anyway, so I have this huge streak. The results blew my mind. I gained about 3 kilograms while staying at roughly the same body fat level, which was far better than any unstructured bulk I'd done before. Looking back, I think this worked for two reasons. First, I ran a very small surplus, only around 100 calories per day on average. Second, I tend to undereat. Tracking kept me in a slight surplus most of the time, but during travel, illness, or disrupted routines, my food intake temporarily dipped into a deficit. Those short periods likely led to small fat losses, while the long stretches of consistent surplus supported muscle growth. The net effect was slow muscle growth with minimal fat gain. I also think a small, consistent daily surplus is more effective than a fluctuating intake that averages out over time. Even when weekly calories are identical, staying in a slight surplus each day likely supports better muscle growth and less fat gain than large day-to-day swings. So, if you tend to undereat, tracking calories may be exactly what you need to break through the intermediate plateau. For me, using MacroFactor made that process much easier. The app adjusts calorie and macro targets automatically based on body weight trends, activity, and metabolism. This helped me stay in the appropriate surplus without having to worry if the targets are set correctly. If you want to try it, you can use my code Radu for a 2-week free trial. To wrap this up, plateaus at the intermediate level are rarely mysterious. They almost always come down to either an insufficient training stimulus or insufficient nutrition to support adaptation.